Okay, we're continuing with Chagiga. We're on Chav Bet Amud Bet by the two dots. We're on 22B-23, the last few lines on the English side, on the right column. Achorayim v'toch. Okay, so if you remember, the last time we learned, we had a Mishnah, and the Mishnah dealt with 11 differences, 10 to 11 differences between the stringencies that we keep for Kodesh, for Karbanot, right? Korbanot, and the stringencies that we keep for Truma, with the stringencies of Korbanot being higher. One of them that were mentioned in the Mishnah was something called Achurayim V'toch, which is usually when a keli becomes tameh. Say you have a metal keli. A metal keli can become tameh from something that's tameh touching it from the outside. We know a klicheres cannot. Klicheres, if it's closed and it's touched from the outside from something tameh, it doesn't become tameh. It has to go from the inside and the airspace inside and it becomes tameh. Okay? So there, the Mishnah said that sometimes when a tumah touches an outside, right? When the tumah touches the outside of a metal or wood keli, just the outside becomes tameh and not the inside, which first of all is not, it's not biblical, right? It's biblical if it's doraita, if the if the um if the outside becomes tameh by metal, the inside also. But that's what the Chachamim said. That's what it said in the Mishnah. So the Acharayim gets tameh, the outside gets tameh, or the handle, or the rim, or the ear of the vessel, the gripping place, the handle that's on the vessel, that becomes tameh, and the rest of the keli does not. And that's true by truma, but by kachim, by karbanos, by kodesh, that is not true. The whole thing becomes tameh, even if it touched only on the outside. So our Gemara picks up, and we're in 22b4. Ma acharaim v'toch. Which acharaim v'toch? How does this happen that when we say that the outside is tameh, the ears are tameh, the hands are tameh, the handles are tameh, and not the inside? Usually by doraita tuma, if you're touching the outside, it also goes to the inside. So the Gemara says, "Kidatnan keli shenitma achurav b'mashkin." A keli that becomes tameh via a liquid. Usually, liquids cannot make a keli tameh because they can only become tameh from an avatuma, and usually liquids is a rishon. So really, the liquid that touches the keli should not become tameh at all. Chachamim went and said liquids that do touch a keli do give it some tumah, and depending where it touches it. If it touches it on the outside, just the outside. That's on the inside, the whole thing becomes tummy. Why did the Chacham make this gedera that mashkin, that liquids become to make something tummy? So they explain as follows: because of a gezerah, the gezerah was made because of the case of a zav, zava, or a nida. That we know that by them, their bodily fluids, their spittle, their urine, right, their bodily fluids is considered an av hatuma and could make a keli tameh. So the Chachamim said, in order to remind us to be careful with some liquids, they made even other liquids that don't metame keli. They made it derabanan that it is metame keli. And so now, if it's a keli of truma, okay, you're right. It's a derabanan tuma of mashkin, right? In order to remind us and remember that we don't forget about the liquids of a zav zava, right? Their liquids are metame for real on the right level. So we'll say for a truma keli, for the truma vessel, the truma utensils, it's only the outside, it's only the ear, it's only the handle, it's only the rim, and it's not the whole keli if it touches from the outside. But for the Kaddish, when you deal with Karbonis, since it's in a higher level of Kedusha, therefore, even if it touches only the outside of the Rabbanan Tumah of Mashkin, the whole keli becomes tummy. And even by Truma, Nitma Tocho, Kuloi Tame. If it went from the inside, right, if this Mashkin, the Rabbanan Tumah Mashkin goes on the inside of the keli, the whole keli becomes Tumah the Rabbanan. Okay, that is Acharaim B'toch. Now, the Mishnah also said one of the parts that if it touches a Truma Keli, only that part becomes Tameh, was something called Uvet HaTzevita, and the Tzevita place. So we want to define what is this Tzevita place. My Bet HaTzevita. What is this Bet HaTzevita? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. So Yehuda said the name of Shmuel. Makom she'etzovto. It's a place at which one hands it to others. It's a handle. It's a gripping place. That's what it is. Omer, and that's what it says in Ruth, where it says Vayitzbot la kali, and he handed her parched grain. So Vayitzbot means the place of handling, place of handing over what they grab onto. That's what it is. From Asi Rabbi Yochanan, Makom sheniki'eh hadat som'in. It is a place in which delicate individuals dip their food. So usually, the way the Mefarshim explain over here is that a lot of times regular people would use their same cup that they drink or they ate from. They use it also to put their condiments, their mustard or vinegar or whatever it is, and they would dip it into there, and then they would throw it out, and then they would drink from it. But the special people, the istinus, people who are careful, people who are delicate in nature, so what did they do? They had a special keli that had like a side partition, a side compartment that would come out and be a little receptacle there. And there they would put their condiments so it doesn't mix with their drink or other foods and stuff like that. Yeah, sometimes you think it's by the kids. Don't put my chicken on top of my French fries. I want it separately. They don't want it to mix. You had these people who were delicate. They didn't want to mix. So they had these condiments and stuff in the separate section. And that's the section that if it touches, right, that place only is mintame, and the rest of the keli is not tumah. Tana Rabbi Bibi Kamei Rav Nachman. Kol hakelim ein lahem acharayim b'toch echad kodshe migdash v'echad kodshe hagivul. Okay. So we said by truma there is an acharayim b'toch, that if it touches the outside, a separate compartment, or it touches the ear, or touches the rim, touches the handle, only that place because some of the rest of the keli is not tumah. And by kodesh, we said the whole keli becomes tumah. Now there's a writer that says what? Not only kodesh hamikdash, but also kodesh hagvul, the kodesh of the boundaries, meaning outside the mikdash. So not only the karbanos in the mikdash, but also stuff outside the mikdash that are kodesh are also don't have an acharayim batoch. Meaning, if somebody touches it, too much the rabbanon touches, the whole thing becomes tummy. And now the Gemara wants to know, what does it mean? Kachegvul. What's kachegvul? Amrle. Kachegvul, minding who? What is kachegvul? Truma. If you say it's truma, that cannot be. But it's not. Acharayim b'toch away to tell truma. We do have acharayim b'toch that if a tumah the rabbanon touches these places, only those places stay tummy, not the rest of the keli. So where else? So what is kachegvul? So dilma lechulin chenaasu al taharas hakadosh. It must be we're dealing with truma chulin that's eaten with the haras hakadosh. So we already saw this that the perushim and the chaverim they would eat their chulin, their regular food, and the holiness of Kodesh. So on that stage, if you're doing that, if you're a parish or a chaver and you're eating your food, on the sanctity of Kodesh, then also if your pots or pans or whatever it is, your cups get tuma, even in a side compartment, even only on the outside, even only on the ear or the rim, all of it becomes tummy because we're going to treat it as the Kodshe Hamigdash, right? And this reminds us at Kartan Milta the Amar. What did we see last time we learned? Achat Esther Malot Shanukan. 11 differences are taught here. Sheish Rishonot. Bring the Kodesh with the Chusha, so there's the Kodesh. He said the first 6, and this is the second one that's mentioned. The first 6 that are mentioned in the Mishnah, even though we're just talking about Kodesh in the Mishnah, it also applies to Chulin that people eat al Taharat HaKodesh, on the sanctity level of Kodesh. Achroniot, the last 5, the Kodesh is only for Kodesh, but Chulin should also al Taharat HaKodesh. Not for Chulin that's eaten al Taharat HaKodesh, and we saw Rashi at that time. We said the first 6 are more deoraitadik, they're more biblical in nature, and therefore they apply bein lekodesh and bein lechulin she'ochel al taharas hakodesh. And whereas the last 5 was less biblical and mostly majority rabbinical, and therefore they didn't find the need to transfer those stringencies onto chulin that is eaten al taharas hakodesh. Fine. Now we come to the next case in the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, "Anoise et hamidras." Midras is a tumah of Ezav, Azava, and Ida, that when they apply their weight to something, that thing becomes tumas midras. Okay, so this is going to be, for an example, is their shoes, their sandals, their slippers. They apply their weight to it, so it becomes tumas midras. The Gemara, the Mishnah was dealing with: can a guy hold tumas midras in one hand and tumas midras in one hand and kodesh or truma in the other hand? And our Mishnah said, truma, you can do that. You can hold truma in one hand and tumas midras in the other hand. Whereas holding trumas midras in one hand and carrying kodesh in the other, that is not allowed. Okay? And I said to midras, I said to truma. Avaloi, yes, I kodesh. Kodesh, my tameloi. Why can't I hold kodesh? I'll make sure they don't touch. What's the problem? Because this gezerah, then you cannot carry tumas midras and kodesh, is because of a story that happened. What is the story that happened? There was a guy that he was traveling with chabit shel yayin, a barrel of wine. It was an earthenware barrel. Okay, so it's an earthenware barrel. So if the shoe touches it from the outside, we're going to see the story. Okay, wait, let me just see. And his ritzua, his strap on the sandal broke off. And he took the strap and he placed it on the barrel. And then the ritzua, the strap, fell into the ear space of the barrel. Since it's a klicheres, once you fall into the air space of the barrel, the whole thing becomes tamah, and it became all tamah. V'otasha amru, noseh et hamidras, noseh et hatiruma, avolo et hakodesh, but not also the you can carry midras and truma, but not kodesh. Just read a little bit more. Ihachi truma nami. Also, truma should be. Why not truma? Listen, if there's an issue of carrying something holy and something tamei, then also if it's true, why are we just making a distinction for kodesh? So Rechni ben Akavi the Amar Lo asru elu yardin usvina uchemaseh shaya. This is the opinion of Chananya ben Akavya, who said when you make a gzera, you make it exactly based on the story that happened. You don't add other things into it. Okay, so what's happening over here? So we have here, this guy had a sandal. He's walking with the sandal. Apparently the sandal is tumas mirjas, and it breaks. Okay? And he puts the strap on top of the barrel, and it falls into the barrel. And because of this, they said no longer can you carry tumas midras and kodesh. That's the way the story you have. Toyos asks a question. Toyos says, I don't understand. Why is this ritzua making anything tummy at all? The ritzua is not a keli. Ritzua is a strap. And since it's not a keli, it shouldn't be able to make something tummy. So that Tosfot must be that the ritzua the strap was significant enough and could have been repaired, and therefore it retained its shame of its name of a keli that could be mikabel tuma, and therefore it could be, therefore it could transfer tuma to the rest of the barrel. Then Tosfot says towards the end, this is the top Tosfot. He says towards the end, he says, well, maybe it's even better yet to learn this Gemara like the Yerushalmi learned. The Yerushalmi says it wasn't just the ritzua that you put on top of the barrel that fell in. He put the whole shoe on top of it, and the shoe fell in. Now, it Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya, he says we made the gzeira based on the way the story happened. The way the story happened, that's the way the gzeira goes. And the Rambam on this halacha about carrying midras and kodesh and truma, he says it like this: truma, yes, and you can carry with it, and kodesh you can't. Fine. Now we said, and how we know it's Rechanina ben Akavya because of the story of the Jordan River and the boat. What's going on? What's the story? The Tanya. It was taught in the Braita. A person should not take chatat water or chatat ashes and go on a boat in the Jordan. And he shouldn't throw it from one side of the Jordan to the other side. He should not float it on the water. And you shouldn't ride upon an animal or a person in the water. You can only transport this ashes in the water of the paraduma if his feet are on the ground. And yet you can walk over a bridge. If only his feet's on a surface, you can take it over. It doesn't make a difference if it's the Jordan River or any other river. They're all the same. Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya says no. Like Asru Elu Meyarden Ubasvina. We're only saying you're not allowed to transport the ashes of the paraduma and the water of the paraduma only on a boat and only over the Jordan. Everything else is okay. Why? Because of the story that happened. What was the story? There was a person who took the ashes, the water of the ashes, onto a boat to bring it to the Jordan. And what happened? While I was on the boat, it was found that on the boat floor there was a piece of a kazayit, of flesh of a corpse. Okay, so they found a dead body, kazayit, piece of a dead body, and he walked over it with the paraduma's ashes and the water of the paraduma. Everything became tummy. So since that, the Shah Amru, that they said, Lo Yisa Ada Mechatat Be'efer Chatat V'Yariyem V'Yarden V'Svina. Therefore, this is the way the story happened. This is the way the Xer should be on the boat over the Jordan You should not take the mei chatat and the par, the efer chatat. And the Rambam, interestingly, Hoskins like the Chachamim in this one. So in the other case, the Rambam said that you do it like the Ma'aser Shahaya, so you can't carry Midrash with Kodesh, but you can carry Midrash with Truma. In this case, the Rambam goes to the Chachamim that say that you cannot float over the ashes, you cannot jump over the ashes, you cannot put it on a boat, you cannot put it on a boat to any other place, whether it's to Jordan or somewhere else. You cannot ride on a person or ride on a behemoth, only if you can walk with it. Not like Rabbi Hanania ben Akavya, who says you only make the zera with the way the story happens. So you have in one case, for the Tumas Midrash, you have like Rabbi Hanania ben Akavya, and by this case on the Mechatat, the Rambam doesn't paskin like Rabbi Hanania ben Akavya, so it must be. So I wanted to say on Shabbos that must be the Rambam. So listen, Mechatat is Mechatat. It's a higher degree of sanctity. Therefore, we have to be much more careful. We have to take this Ma'aser Shahaya and learn from it more. And okay, that's Lala. Fine. Gemara asked a question. Ibailu, Sandal Tome, Sandal Toher Mahu. By this Tumas Midrash, remember the story was with the sandal. Am I worried about all sandals? No, because it happened with the sandal was Tame, but maybe the Gzera is on all sandals. So you extend the Gzera. Chavit Petucha, Chavit Situma Mahu. In this story that happened, the Ritzua or the sandal fell into the barrel. Must be the barrel was somewhat open. What happens if the barrel is sealed? Can I put it on top then? Aber Menasa Mahu. What happens if he went ahead and he did it anyway? He carried Tumas Mirdas and Kodesh. What happens then? But didn't touch. So Aber Menasa Mahu. If Aber Menasa Tame, if he did it, it's Tame, whether it touched or not. That it's going to be Tahor. And Rabbi Yochanan says in all these cases, one can be Mako because we're dealing with the Tumas Derabanan and Xera, and it wasn't put in these other cases, and therefore a person could be Mako according to Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, we're now coming to the sixth case that was mentioned in the Mishnah, and that was Nigbarim Kalim and Nigbarim Mitahar. The person was making Kalim, so that it was a piece of metal, and he's turning it into a Kali. And after he turns it into a Kali, and it's tar, the whole time it's tar. And he's turning it into a Kali, and he finished it with Tahara, he has to go and tovel it. Why? Why does he have to tovel it? So Gemara says, 1 second, the Gamrina man, who's finishing it? The Gamrini who Chaver, if you tell me it's a Chaver, a Parish, someone who's very careful to Madara, why do I have to do Tefillah? He was careful from the start. So it must be that he finished it by an Amaretz. The Mishnah can call finishing a Keli by an Amaretz as finished b'tahara. Amaretz are considered Tameh. So therefore, you cannot say it was completed with Tahara if it was completed by a Amaretz. Amar Reshila, Amar Rav Matna, Amar Shmuel, Lo'ilam, Digamiru Chaver. You're right. The case is when the Chaver, a Talmud Chacham, and Parish, someone who's careful with Tumah Tahara. He's the one who finishes the Keli. Umishum Tzinora the Ama Aretz. But what's the concern? The spittle, the liquid of an Ama Aretz. That's considered Tameh, and therefore we say to do the Tefillah. Gemara says, the Nafo Emas. When did the spittle fall? If you say it fell before the Keli was finished, Halav Manahu, it wasn't a Keli yet, so it cannot be Mikabel to Eva Blafter the Gabe. Rather, it must mean that that the spittle fell after the Keli was complete. It cannot be either. Mizar, as they hear, Behu. The person would be entirely careful. The Chav would be very careful to make sure that Amar doesn't come next to the Keli. So where do you have the case? Where it says Lo'ilam Mikame Digamere. It must be where the spittle fell on the keli before the keli was complete. Therefore, the chaver wasn't worried because it's not a complete keli yet. The spittle doesn't do anything. But then what happened? And our concern is that you're right, the chaver wasn't worried at first because the keli wasn't complete. But then the chaver completes the keli, and the spittle of the amaret is still wet. And if it's still wet, that means you could give it to him. Still wet, didn't evaporate. And therefore, that's the chash. That's the chash. And if that's the chash, that's why you need to be low. That's why it says, Nigmarin b'tahara, when it comes to completing a keli, even if it's tahar. For truma, you do not have to toggle it, but for kodesh, you do have to toggle it because of this chash. That maybe the amaret's spittle was on there before it was completed, and then it was still there when it was completed, and it was wet, and it could bring a tumor. Okay. Then the Gemara says, if you're midaik, and the way we say it in the Mishnah, it means tevilah, and you need tevilah, and you don't need erev shemesh low. You don't need erev shemesh. There are some tumas that it's not enough that you just want to do mikvah. You have to also wait for nightfall. And the fact that it's telling us tevilah, it means tevilah you need. But nightfall, you don't need. Okay? Right? Because on a biblical level, you toivel it, and then you wait for nightfall. But here it's a derabanan. There's a lenient tahara process requiring only immersion and not nightfall. Okay? So now, based on this reading of the Mishnah, the Gemara says, I'll tell you who this Mishnah is not like. Masnitzan, our Mishnah, Deloy Rabbi Eliezer. It's not like Rabbi Eliezer. How do we know? It's not like Rabbi Eliezer. Titnan shofar fered shechatecha lechatat. Rabbi Eliezer omer yitbol miyad. Rabbi Yeshua omer yitameh ve'achar kach yitbol. Okay. Need a little bit of a hakdama to this part. We're talking about the mei chatat and the efer chatat. We're dealing with the parah duma's ashes. Now, what's special about the parah duma's ashes? It was done in a very, very interesting way. All right, so you have to remember that during the time of the Mikdash, there was a sect of Jews known as the Sadducees, right? The Tzedukah. The Tzedukah were one of the early reform groups that said, we don't have this Torah Sheba'al Peh. There's only a Torah Sheba'al. The Torah says that's what we do. We don't give drashas. There's no rabbanon, right? The rabbis are known as the Perushim, the Pharisees, and the Tzedukah were known as the Sadducees. So there was a machloket of how to learn the Psukim. When it comes to the laws of Parah Aduma, it says twice, Ish Tahar, Ish Tahar. Because a pure person should be the one to burn, a pure person is the one to spray, whatever the story is over there, it says it twice, Ish Tahar, Ish Tahar. So the Tzedukah said, from here we see, he has to be completely tar. Not only he went to mikvah, he also has to be, that nightfall already arrived for him. And that's why he's completely tar. Chana said no. If it said ishtar, I understand it has to be completely tar. One time, ishtar, that's a tar, it means completely tar. So why are you saying ishtar a second time? You should just say that person should do the next step. Why does it say ishtar and then ishtar again? So says the Chachamim to tell you, even someone who is only halfway tahor, right? He went to the mikvah, but he didn't have nightfall yet. And therefore, Ishtar teaches you that this guy, before nightfall, can also do the parah aduma. Now, the Chachamim wanted to stick it to the Tzedukah, right? They wanted to make it clear to everybody, we don't hold like the Tzedukah at all. That even though in Ishtar, a person is completely tar, is good to do the parah aduma, we want to show that according to Chachamim, that even someone who's a Tvul Yom, he went into the mikveh during the day, but he's waiting Erev Shemesh, can also do the paraduma. So to do that, we would make the person tameh and then send them to the mikveh. And all the utensils that are used for the paraduma, we would also make them tameh and then total them and then use them before nightfall to show that we hold like the Chachamim and not like the Tzdukim. Okay, that's the background. That's the background information. Now, how do we apply it to this Gemara? The Gemara says, what happens if a guy is making a new box to hold the ashes? He's taking a reed and he is hollowing out whatever he needs to hollow out inside there, a little bit, whatever that needs to be hollowed out. So he's hollowing out the reed to make it as a box, as a container for the ashes. So, according to Rabbi Yeshua, we're going to see in a minute, Rabbi Yeshua says, okay, you made the box, now you want to use it for the ashes, not so fast. First, you have to be mitamet the box, and then tovel it, and then use it, right? Before it's a Erev Shemesh. And that's when you're going to use it to show, not like the Tzedukim. If the Eliezer says, listen, you're finishing a keli. The keli is Tuma, we know. Nigmarin Kalim b'Tahara, they're Tameh. So you total them. And that is enough. Now, what's the idea? Eliezer, you're not the one who teaches this Mishnah of ours. Why? Because our Mishnah said, Nigmarim Kalim b'Tahara, you total them, and you don't need Erev Shemesh. And you're saying if you're using it for Mechatat, you total it, and you don't need Erev Shemesh. Where is the hecker? Where is the recognition by the Stokin that you're totaling it because you're saying it doesn't need Erev Shemesh? But you always say a keli that's completed doesn't need Erev Shemesh, you just total it. So the reason why you're totaling is not to go against the Tzdukin, but rather because it's Nigmar and Kalim b'Tahara needs Tvila and not Erev Shemesh. So you're not sticking it to the Tzdukin. That is how we know Rabbi Eliezer is not the author of our Mishnah. Now let's do all this inside. Okay. It's not Shofei Feret Shechatachal Chatat by hollowing out it too. For cutting the chatat, right, to put the ashes inside there. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Yitbol Miyad, right away he immerses it, and then he uses it, so you don't have Erev Shemesh. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Yeshua says no, Yitameh, first make it Tameh, but Achar Kach, Yitbol, and then you immerse it, and then you use it. The Havinan Ba, and it was discussed about this. The Chatachaman, who is cutting it. If you say it was a chaver, why doesn't he feel at all? It must be is according to the Ezra, right? Why did you tell that at all? If it's a chaver, you must say that it was cut by an amaretz. Maybe eat balls. So then why did Yeshua say you have to tame it? If amaretz touches it, of course everyone says you have to towel it. So why you have to touch? Tuma according to Yeshua. Oh, Tame, Vikoi, the Amaretz is Tame, that's enough. And you do in the seducers we see, the Tzdukim would see that we're not waiting for Erev Shemesh. Amar Rabba Bar Shila, Amar Rabba Matna, Amar Shmuel. Lo'ilam the Chat Chachaber. Really, it was cut by a chaver, a parch. And we shouldn't snoo the Amaretz. And we're only worried about the spittle of the Amaretz. When did it fall? The Nefel Emas, when did it fall? If you say before he completed the keli, it wasn't yet a keli, so it can't be kavatuma. If you say it happened after, the chaver will be very careful. The Amar says doesn't come close to it. Like we learned before, to the chetcha. Spittle fell in it before it was complete. Dilma. But the whole gzeir is but we're worried that perhaps the spittle was still moist when he completed the keli, and therefore Therefore, what's it called? It needs the tefillah. Now, this Rabbi Yeshua. Hainu the ikar hekra stukin. According to Rabbi Yeshua, everything is great. Why? Because there is a hecker. There is a hecker. I'm being metamet to something, and then I'm totaling so that Stu can see that I'm metamet, and it really needs Erev Shemesh to become completely tar, and I'm using it before the Erev Shemesh, right after the Tefillah. Okay? So there is a hacker. I know the Ika Hekar Litstokin. It's not. Mitame in Hayu with the Kohen Asar with the par. They make the Kohen who's going to burn the par. Tame. Lohotzi Miliban Shil Stokin Shay Omrim. The Morve Shemesh Haitana said. Take away from the Stokin to think that they need someone who had Erev Shemesh. And the answer. But according to the answer, where is the hacker? Marta, if you say that he usually holds that you need Erev Shemesh, Nigmara, Keli, B'Tahara, you need Erev Shemesh, and now you don't need it, so that's the hacker. Anyway, Marta Ba'amal, but you learn a mission that says all the time you Nigmar, Keli, you don't need Erev Shemesh, my Hikara, it's token, Eka. So where is the hacker for the token when you completed this? Because you're just doing it as a Nigmar and Keli, B'Tahara. Not to show you that Stukin here, I'm totaling it, I'm not waiting for Erev Shemesh. I never need Erev Shemesh. Just Nigmar Keli with Tahara. So I just need Tefillah. So where is the hecker according to Rabbi Eliezer? And therefore, our Mishnah cannot be like Rabbi Eliezer. Amarav, Rav says, no, our Mishnah can still be like Rabbi Eliezer. And we're on top of Chav Gimel Amid Beis. Asa'ua Kitemeya Sheretz. Says, no. Not a regular Tumah. Then with Gzeira, maybe the spittle of the Amaretz, Nigmar Keli. No. When it comes to Mei Chatat, when it comes to the Par Chatat, we say anything that's used for it, anything that's made for it, we're giving it a Tumah of a Sheretz. And a Tumah of a Sheretz definitely needs Erev Shemesh. And here I'm totaling it, and I'm not waiting for Erev Shemesh. And it's known to the Stokin that we are giving it this assignment of Tumas Sheretz. Gemara says, Elimata, 1 second. And that's the hecker. Gemara says, 1 second. Elimata. If you're giving it Tumas Sheretz, and to the Sheretz touch, it's as if the Sheretz touched the Keli, Adam, the person doesn't become Tameh from that. Al Matanya, and we said the one who cuts the tube, or the one who immerses it, puts in the mikvah, they'll have to go to the mikvah, meaning that the keli, the chatacha, the hollowed out reed, it's such a tumah that you get people tummy. But if a sheretz is tummy and it touches the keli, that keli cannot make a person. So you know what could? Ela asuya kitimeya mace. Rather, the assignment we give to the keli that's completed to hold the ashes is the tumas of a dead body of a corpse. And now, if that corpse touches the keli can still make another human tummy. And that's why they have to go to the mikvah. Whereas at Yachi, if it's tumas mace, Yachi, Tavoya, Hazaz, Shlishi, Shvi. Then what? It's going to need the 3rd and 7th day to be sprinkled on with the paraduma. And you don't have that. Amatanya chotcha matilta tibila. Tibila in hazat shelishi shvilo. You only need tibila, it says these people, and they're not needing 3 and 7. So, what's the case? Ela suya kitimeya mes bishvi shelo. So rather, the assignment of tumah that is given to the keli that's made for the paraduma is a tumas mace, but on the 7th day after being sprinkled on the 3rd and 7th day. That's the assignment of the tumah the Rabbanan gave to kelim that are going to be used for paraduma. So therefore, they can make someone else tamei, and they really need Erev Shemesh because of the assignment that they were given in the tumah, and they're not waiting for Erev Shemesh, and the people afterwards have to go to the mikvah. Now, the Gemara's question is, hold on a second. There was a statement said that we don't make up tumas on stuff that are associated with the paraduma. So how are we making up this assignment of tumas mace on the 7th day after the 3rd and 7th sprinkle for the equipment of the paraduma? Summer Baya. No. What it means we don't make up, it means as follows. Moshe. Kidatanya. We don't say that something that cannot be getting tumah has tumah. That's what we don't say. We don't make up that assignment. For example, we know that a Zav, Anida, when they sit on something, even indirectly, they put their weight there, they get that thing tummy. But it has to be something that is roi to be seated on. Meaning, if they go and they sit on a shovel or a spade or something like that, which is not something to be sitting on, they do not make that tummy. Kedetanya. Vayoshev alekeni yochel kama yochel. You would have thought kafos of the yoshev aleya if he took a container of a saw and sat on it, turned upside down and sat on it, becomes tamei. Tarka yoshev aleya takes a tarka, another type of container, and he sits in it. You might think, oh, listen, he sat in it, therefore it's tamei. Talmud Leimer the Hayoshev alekeli asher yeshiv olav yitma, on what you will sit on it, meaning stuff that you usually sit on it. Amishim yuchad l'shiva yatsa zeh she'omrim lo amo v'naseh b'nachtenu. And you cannot make tamei something that is used for work, and guy sat on it. Now it's tamei. No, shovel doesn't become tamei. Spade doesn't become tamei just because you sat there. Actually, something that is seatable, something that you sit on. So what it means is we don't make up tamei. We don't put tamei on something that on its own cannot get that tumah. But you could assign a tumah to something that could get that tumah, right? This box could get tumas mace if an actual what's it called, dead body touched it or got in the same room with it. It would get that. So it's not making it up to something that it can't get. A shovel can never get the tumah of a nida sitting on it. It can't get it because that's just not applicable. Therefore, you cannot assign it that tumah. But you could assign the tumah of a seventh day dead, right, of touching by a dead of a seventh day after the third and seventh sprinkle. You could assign that type of tumah, and therefore that was assigned the paraduma, and perhaps that's really Ezer. That would be the nicker, and that would be the hecker, and the Stukin would know it was assigned to that level of tumah, and they did not wait for Erev Shemesh, and that was the hecker, and therefore he can still be the author of our Mishnah as well. Our Mishnah talk about Nigmar Keli, nothing to do with Mei Chatat and the Afar Chatat, and therefore only needs tefillah and not Erev Shemesh. Okay. That is the Gemara for today. We ended off on page 23, B2. So now.